Welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by husky, hairy, huggable homos who love film. So here we go.
I don't know if you guys could see that, but I totally made a little panda bear and emoji action. I was trying to get it to work with screen sharing, but it wasn't working very well. It was making me mad. So we don't want a mad Brad panda. In any event, hello everybody, and welcome once again to the Movie Bears podcast. We are coming to you a day later than we normally would. That's because we're all coming back from two separate vacations. Jim and I were in Palm Springs with a big group of bear chub chaser friends for Palm Springs Pride. And Will Lindis was at BlizzCon experiencing
not far away.
Of nerdy goodness, not too far away. And in fact, it's funny because Will, some people you hung out with at BlizzCon drove through Palm Springs to hang out with us on their way back to Tucson. So it was like this weird, like, third-party convergence of our vacations.
Also, we both hung out with a bunch, just a bunch of, like, attractive, chubby people. Just the difference is that I think a lot of mine were straight.
And a lot of ours were probably...
at least they thought they were.
Well,
yeah.
I didn't
you
say
never
all.
know. You never know. But anyway, we're glad to be back in the saddle again, even if we are a day late. We're going to be discussing Thor Ragnarok, the newest movie from Marvel and the latest entry in the Thor franchise. We're also going to be serving up some movie news. We've got a big topic to talk through this week, so we're excited to do that. Just a couple housekeeping items before we do that. One, I was looking at the chat, guys, and like I was reading a word that ended in ing and it like fused in my brain. Do want to say hello to everyone that's already hanging out with us in the live chat. Simon, who we just saw at Fantastic Fest a few weeks ago, coming to us from all the way across the globe, the opposite side of the planet. Simon, glad to have you with us. Weeping Jay is here as well. Welcome. It looks like we've got about 10 people hanging out with us so far. So if you are listening live, be sure to say hello in the live chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Thor, on our upcoming movie news item that we want to talk to you guys about. So definitely jump in and say hello in that live chat. Two, just want to say up front, if you are new to the format of our show, we are going to talk about Thor Ragnarok spoiler free for a little bit before we get into the meat and potatoes of spoiler Asgardia. I don't even know what you want to call it. So if by the time we're done with movie news you're like, oh my god, I haven't seen Thor, I gotta jump off, don't worry, we got your back. We'll give you some initial impressions, and then fair warning before we open up that can of spoilers. Hey, Ben's with us as well. I see him pop into the live chat. Howdy, Ben. Glad to have you with us. I would do, as my third housekeeping item, want to officially introduce my fellow co-hosts. However, I feel like I'm hogging the spotlight, which is weird because I'm not the kind of guy who likes the spotlight. So let me hand this over for a little bit to my wonderful husband, who's rolling his eyes at me for some reason. Jim Pugliafico. Hi, I guess. Jim.
I love to pull your leg on that stuff. But hello, thanks, and for letting me talk. And welcome to the podcast, everyone.
I'm gonna pull your leg later. It may not be your two really long legs. I mean, it's still a long leg, but I may. Anyway, now that I need a cold shower, Will Lindis is here. Welcome, Will. How are you?
Also in need of a cold shower, apparently. Whoo, that was a little spicy there, Brad. So glad to be here with you with chat. We've got a great crowd of people joining us to talk movies with us in our chat today. So this is going to be good.
Indeed. Well, Steve Sosa says, hello, my dudes. Is my dudes a thing now?
It is totally a thing. I my dudes.
It's a thing, babe. Yeah. We know it's a thing. We got it at a drive-through one time.
I feel like I'm still getting used to like on fleek and lit and the resurgence of legit.
Woot.
Okay,
well, Woot's been around forever.
Legit is still pretty legit. I think on fleek is no longer on fleek. But I'm down for my dudes. I'm my dudes sometimes. It's fun. Try it. Say it to someone. Like There are very few ways that you can refer to like a group of friends that put as huge a smile on your face as saying "my dude." Seriously, like I thought it was dumb. I said it. I was like, oh, that's fun. I like that. I like that feeling. I like the feeling of having dudes. It's good.
I like the feeling of having dudes as well, but probably not in the context
The
in which
feeling
it
of
was
dudes.
said.
I like feeling dudes also.
They could, they're not mutually exclusive.
The touch, the feel of my dudes. Anyway, the fabric of our lives. Thank you, Cotton commercial jingle from 1992. In any event, we're going to get this
episode
party
brought to you by Cotton.
We're going to get this party rocking and rolling. We are on the fun train to movie news town. So we're going to go there. Hope you guys are ready. Will, Jim, are you strapped into your seats, ready to go?
Let's go.
Let's do
What
it.
you got on the movie news wire?
All right. We'll find out in just a second. Here we go. Some movie news. All right. So funny story. We were all like picking our movie news items like independently this week, and we've all apparently chosen the same movie news item, which I think underscores some of the seriousness of what's going on right now. I don't know if the rest of you guys have heard of this, but Disney, in response to a series of articles from the Los Angeles Times about its relationship with Anaheim and some of the different tax incentives and breaks that Disney gets, due to a series of not super positive articles, Disney banned the Los Angeles Times from covering press screenings of their upcoming movies. Kind of a dick move, especially in a time where, the president of our country is trying to suppress the press. I'm like, really, Disney? Do you really want to be like that? I guess so. And so in response to Disney's banning of the LA Times, some of the different critics groups who make up some of the voting blocks for the Oscars decided that unless Disney publicly walked back that ban, took it away, and I guess apologized, they were lobbying to have Coco, which is Disney's really only probably consideration film for the Oscars this year, not be considered. Because of the press ban, Disney would lose out on potential Oscar nomination and love. Disney has since bowed to that pressure and walked back their ban of the Los Angeles Times. Full access has apparently been restored, and Disney released a statement. But I'm wondering, how do you guys feel about this? A giant movie studio, a huge company like this, slapping the press around. You think Disney was in their rights? Were they not? What do you guys think?
Well, Disney is making a lot of news these days. There's this story. There was some news about them possibly buying a huge chunk of Fox this week as well. So maybe they're just kind of like trying to flex their muscle or something and acting like the big schoolyard bully at this point. I don't know. I didn't read the articles from the LA. Was it the LA Times? I think it was.
Yeah.
That was critical of the Disney Association and some of the stuff that they were doing specifically with Anaheim and all that stuff. And so this tactic was kind of crazy. They're like saying, oh, well, we'll have these, we either won't have these press screenings in these areas, or we'll have the press screenings, and guess what? Certain critics from LA Times, you're not invited. So that was kind of shitty. It didn't last long though, right? The news is that they came out today and said, oh, well, we've now talked it over with the LA Times' new management or new facets of management, and we've worked it all out, and the bans are no longer, in fact, everything back to normal. I mean, Disney could have stood to, been kind of in an uphill battle to get some of their this year's movies. We talked about Coco, which hasn't even been released yet. Star Wars: The Last Jedi is coming out. We've had Beauty and the Beast this year. We had Cars 3, which, arguably maybe would have been only in the running for certain maybe animation stuff. There's the shorts, which is Lou, which was their little short that came before Cars 3, I think. So yeah, so Disney's always kind of in the running. They haven't really had a big win in a long time, but and remember, this stuff all kind of goes to the bottom line, which is the dollar, right? If you don't get Oscar buzz and you're not being talked about at the end of the year, that's going to cut into your sales a little bit, even if you are Disney. So yeah, I just don't think it was a really smart move to just pick on the critics and say, oh, well, you guys, your paper isn't being fair to me in this area, so I'm going to cut you out of this area. It's kind of shitty, and I think I think they realize now how silly it was.
Yeah, there are very specific and very limited situations where it can be justifiable to blacklist a particular media outlet. For example, if you've got an outlet that's consistently breaking embargo, that's something that's like, I understand it in that particular circumstance. In this circumstance, what we've got is Disney did this not because of anything related to any of their films or the coverage of their films, but something related to a different part of their business, the parks and resorts part of their business. And because of that, it does not sit very well with me either. Brad, you mentioned before at the beginning, we have a president who's currently big on the whole, I don't like what these guys are saying, fake news, real news, fake news. And while that's not exactly that's what's happening here, it does fall in that same, makes you feel a little dirty and feels uncomfortable category. What's interesting about this is how well everyone band together. So we got LA Times was the outlet that was originally blacklisted, and the groups that came together were a bunch of critic organizations, the National Society of Film Critics, the New York Film Critics Circle, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, and the Boston Society of Film Critics all jumped in there and said, hey, we're going to blacklist you from our individual awards. So what that ends up doing there is Disney would be out of the running for any of the, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it sort of is. Wouldn't be eligible for any of the New York, Los Angeles, or Boston awards,
because they have their own awards, which lead up to the big show.
They're part of the buzz from those bleeds into Directors Guild and Producers Guild and Screenwriters Guild and all of those, which bleeds into Oscars. So this would have a profound effect, even if it was, even if you'd probably still see some, if this had persisted, you'd probably still see a Disney short sneak its way into the Oscars or something like this. But it's still this would have been a bad look for them. It would have just been a bad situation all around. So the fact that all these critic organizations banded together and Disney walked itself back, I think is a pretty positive thing. Uncomfortable, ugly situation to begin with, but the outcome is good. I feel like, hey, maybe the press still has a role to play.
They could have just bought the LA Times and handled it that way. I mean, that's kind of the way Disney operates these days.
That would be a Lex Luthor caliber move right there.
Yeah.
It's also hard here because Hollywood as a whole, and critics being an extension, they are an arm of Hollywood. They have a love of the press. I mean, think about things like Spotlight, which did so well a couple of years ago. The Spielberg movie, The Post, coming out later this year, which is about the press. Things about hard-hitting journalism tend to do fairly well amongst critics organizations. So yeah, this was a boneheaded move by Disney. Just really, really they've got enough Teflon on them that the bad PR from this won't stick. But at the same time, it's not a good look.
Yeah, and you know how big companies work. We don't know what the communication is like inside Disney when somebody made the decision, somebody within Disney made the decision to kind of exclude the critics from the LA Times critics from those screenings. Probably wasn't the it probably wasn't a decision made by the chairman of Disney. It probably was made at a lower level, some guy or woman, trying to do what they thought maybe was right at the time. And who knows if that person's still going to have their job after the end of this week. I don't know.
You hear a lot about that with like tech and games journalism, not getting into games journalism, capital G, capital J, Gamersgate, all that stuff. But you hear about that a lot in that particular field, because those companies are a lot quicker to blacklist in reviewing sites, because they don't have the clout or the tenure of like a major city's newspaper publication. Right. It's generally like an online site or something along those lines. So I'm sure some of it came from someone in the legal team saw, like they probably had they've probably blacklisted a few, like, and that happens with companies, like a few like smaller, more like Spitfire, more shady things. And they thought, well, I guess it would be okay to apply that same thing here, which is, again, technically in their right to do, but terrible optics.
Right. Brad, what did you think about it? You haven't given us opinion. You're just like,
sometimes I like to sit back and watch. But now that I've gotten my voyeuristic streak scratched, I would say for me, not a great move, Disney. And it's unfortunate because I love so much of what Disney is doing and what they're putting out. The news with them buying a big chunk of Fox as well would be interesting. I wonder how long until Disney just has a monopoly on like everything, like cool franchise wise. Like they become the Borg. They just assimilate everything cool. I don't know. We'll see. But I actually found it kind of surprising that they outright banned the LA Times. And then I was kind of like, all right, this is going to be like a pissing match. Like, who's going to walk it back first here? And I was actually surprised Disney did it as quickly as they did. I thought for sure this was going to be a little more protracted. So when I saw everything start to come out today, I was like, okay. Disney flinched first. So I think it was a bad move on their part. I think the higher ups at Disney recognize that. And so obviously they're taking steps to try and repair things a little bit. I do feel like they were trying to still keep control of the spin, though. The whole thing in their official statement about, we've partnered with the new leadership at the LA. Yeah, exactly, Will, in your little thumbnail. You're like,
we'll save whatever face we can.
You're like jerking off or shake weighting. I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, it's why not both? I think it's exactly accurate here. So bonehead move from Disney, but I hope it sends a message.
It was kind of interesting that Disney decided to pick on this one news outlet, the LA Times, and then all of these critics associations kind of were able to kind of come together and rise up against this monster. It's kind of has a comic book movie element to it, right? Like, the villain, I'm gonna go attack this village, but no, you're not, because this village has friends and they all get together and they're gonna fuck you up. And that's it kind of has a little bit of that element to it. I would have liked to have been behind the scenes of the critics associations and like the correspondence that must have happened pretty quickly to come together like that.
And it makes it to where this isn't even a straight up like David and Goliath type circumstance, because all of those critics organizations represent like an arm of the Hollywood machine, right? So it's almost like this is Goliath versus a smaller Goliath that kind of rose up against it. And in that regard, it is pretty cool to see, especially in bringing it back to politics in a time where we've had so many of these like fake news things, and we've seen in the political world, we've seen some of these news outlets kind of like band together in a similar way and say, hey, you can't do that to them. We all stand united on this. So right. I would imagine some of this is taking a play from that particular playbook.
Probably.
Indeed. Well, we'll have to see.
That's
if
it for
Disney...
business news, ladies and gentlemen. Now on to movies.
Oh goodness, I know, right? But I don't know. That was kind of the big thing going on this week, outside of the stuff going on with Harvey Weinstein, Stein, whatever, Kevin Spacey. Oh goodness, there's a lot going on there. I don't know that we want to touch that stuff. It's been covered. It's been talked about a lot.
Yeah, don't go into the comments, whatever you do.
I will say, it was funny this weekend in Palm Springs. We're hanging out with a bunch of bears and chasers and chubs in the house, and it's Palm Springs, clothing optional, whatever. And so like we kept joking about like not Weinsteining each other and not Kevin Spacing each other. It's like ask permission first, So
Oh boy.
the controversies were very like close in our minds.
They can't not be. This is they're such an important part of like kind of what's happening right now. Everyone knows who Kevin Spacey is. Everyone knows what's going on. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It's such a part of our fabric that it's on every conversation.
So in the comments, Sammy W, who was one of our friends in Palm Springs, says this whole thing with Disney and the LA Times and the critics was all a false flag move to get people to stop talking about Harvey Weinstein.
I have a feeling that there aren't enough false flags in the world to get people to stop associating Harvey Weinstein with his allegations.
It was all orchestrated by his minions. Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. Well, guys, we have a movie to discuss, and a rather big film at that. How do we feel about making that transition? Are we on board?
Yeah, let's do this.
Let's cross the Rainbow Bridge. Or whatever that fucking thing is called.
All right. So we are going to be talking Thor Ragnarok, spoiler free for probably 10 or 15 minutes. If you're on this fence about seeing this movie for some reason, we'll give you our initial impressions, whether we think you should see it in theaters, wait for rental, skip it entirely. Chances are, though, Jim and Will, most people listening to the show have probably already seen this movie anyway. So we don't have to go super long on our non-spoilery thoughts, but we'll get them in there. But guys, we will give you fair warning before we open that can of spoiler whoop ass on you. So no worries. You'll have time. Ben in the chat is reminding us, Jim, that the Rainbow Bridge or the Rainbow Road is called the Bifrost.
Yeah, it's only called Rainbow Road if you're shooting shells down it.
Does it have anything to do with frost? Because all I saw was rainbows. Like, what is it? Okay, well, never mind. We'll get into that later.
Well, I mean, for that matter, like, is it bisexual? Like, why is it called bi? Is it
somebody needs to nerd
Bifrost Bridge
Somebody needs
podcast.
to nerd explain this to me, please.
No, we don't need to. Like, it's called the Bifrost Bridge, and we'll just leave it there.
Bifrost path.
Yeah, we'll just leave it right there.
Oh boy! All right, here we go. Our discussion of Thor Ragnarok. I feel like it's only fitting to grab Mjolnir off my desk since, we're discussing a Thor movie. Have a little thunder going on. If I can. Oh yeah. You hear that? All right.
So tell me, besides that noise, during that pause, did you guys all have Led Zeppelin's "The Immigrant Song" playing in your head when Brad introduced?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, hell yes.
Oh boy! All right, so big movie to talk about here. Will, why don't you kick things off for us a little bit? Everyone knows what this movie's about. They've seen the trailer a million times. We can be very brief, but initial thoughts: was this good for you? Not so much. See it? Don't see it? What do you think?
Yeah, so Thor Ragnarok, this is the 17th, I believe, Marvel movie. And that's quite a bit. But it's this is the third of the Thor films. It features Thor himself. in a couple of different scenarios, including gladiatorial combat and also trying to protect his own homeland from a new foe. And I'll get into more of that later on. This third movie is directed by Taika Waititi. This is the dude that gave us Hunt for the Wilder People and What We Do in Shadows. And it repositions the character of Thor in a more comedic light than in the previous two. A lot of people would have said that Thor, The Dark World, was one of the kind of the lower tier Marvel movies because it was overly serious, except for its few quippy like human characers, like
the usual quippiness.
The girl from like Two Broke Girls, gosh, I forget her name now. Had some like quippiness in that, but it was an overly serious movie comparatively. Here we get to see Taika Waititi, who is a comedic director, applying that same tone to this film, and for me it phenomenally works. What we've got here is an exploration of the character of Thor himself, in a way that's a little different than what we've seen in the past. I think that Thor in the Marvel universe has worked a little bit better as I'm also in the Avengers movies as opposed to a standalone guy, because they've not figured out how exactly to tell his story from a solo perspective. For me, this movie is sort of the equivalent of what we got with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is the movie that really excited me for Captain America as a solo character, not just another player in this Avengers world. Part of what makes this film work so well is it's got an incredible cast. Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston are back as Thor and Loki and are quite good in those roles, especially with Chris Hemsworth having revealed himself here and to a lesser degree in Ghostbusters as a comedic powerhouse. I think this is definitely the right angle for him. But Kate Blanchett is here, Idris Elba, Jeff Goldblum, Tessa Thompson, Carl Urban, Mark Ruffalo, Taika Waititi himself. And what's so cool about these characters is I was thinking about which one of them stole the movie for me, because I was getting ready to come in here with some hot takes like, oh man, Tessa Thompkins' Valkyrie stole the movie for me. But really, all like 8 or 9 of those names that I just mentioned took turns stealing the movie for me. That's a sign of a cast that is well directed, and with characters all put in very, very interesting roles that are designed to be awesome and cool. Couple that with fun effects, some stakes that, despite all the comedy, do actually matter, and I guess also with the immigrant song that you mentioned before, which comes into play in some pretty interesting places. This movie was really, really solid. Couple minor quibbles. I think that it's maybe over. Like, I wouldn't say this movie is too funny in that like it had too many jokes, but I feel like it didn't necessarily pace out all of its jokes as well as I would have liked. Like, there were a couple of times where I thought it could have gone for a serious tone instead of a joke, or just shifted a joke back a little bit and let a serious moment linger a little bit. But that's all quibble stuff. This is a pretty solid, like, 4-star movie for me. I definitely recommend it.
All right. So we got a recommend from Will. Jim, how about you?
I'm really on the fence about this movie because going in, I mean, I loved Hunt for the Wilder People. What We Do in the Shadows was fine. Okay. It was almost like sketch comedy, but taken to like a movie length. This one coming in, I'm like, oh, let's see how this is going to work in a Marvel comic book movie, which in the past, the comedy in these movies has pretty much been relegated to just quippiness between characters, except for the Deadpool movie, which pretty much has a very comedic character at its center. From day one with Deadpool, we knew we were going to get that. Thor, not so much. I mean, they had 2 movies in the canon, plus his appearances with the Avengers, that established him as kind of a, maybe he had a light side, but he was a pretty no-nonsense, stoic kind of guy. And now we see a totally a little bit, well, more than a little bit, a substantial shift in character. I liked the first act of this movie a lot because I'm like, oh, wow, they're really deconstructing and really poking fun at the whole superhero comic book movie genre in a way with the kind of the setup of this film. And I like the way it set that up. And then, Will, and maybe this gets to your point of where they didn't kind of continue the comedy at some points. It got into like after they got done lampooning a lot of the comic book stuff that in other movies and the seriousness of that with its comedy, it kind of reverted right back to that and got more pretty pedestrian, bad guys against good guys. How's the good guy going to get out of this bad situation? And then at the end, it got a little bit better for me in the third act because the stakes were obviously risen in the third act. But yeah, I'm really on the fence. I would say, for me, maybe this is the best of the Thor movies, slightly for me. So I would say, Marvel movie fans are going to go see this movie anyway, but I'd say this movie is also fine to wait and see if you wanted to rent it. So yeah, I'm really on the fence about this one, guys.
Understandable. Let's see. For me, I liked it. I didn't love it. I mean, I think it was entertaining. It was fine. I think a big part of the problem I have, unfortunately, is the comedy. I feel like I say this every show, but I have a weird comedy bone, weird funny bone. And so the first couple Thor movies have some enjoyable comedy moments to them. Jim, you kind of mentioned it's when they're sort of quipping back and forth, but I feel like this movie really tried to go out of its way to like bring some Guardians of the Galaxy style humor to this. And of course, Waititi has his own brand of humor that he's bringing in. And it was a little problematic for me, especially like when some of the more serious stuff is going down. It felt, I don't know, kind of uneven. Sometimes like with Seth MacFarlane humor, you let the joke like marinate too much and it ends up going rancid. And I think that's what happens here sometimes as well. Is it's like, all right, how much mileage can we really get out of insert certain moment? And we can talk about some of that in spoilers. Will, I know you mentioned that's maybe a little quibbly, and maybe it is, but for me, I don't know. Like, I wanted to see more of the serious stakes. Like, there's bad shit happening with Cate Blanchett's character and Asgard and what's going on there, and then we have this like giant sideways segue into Thor and Hulk, and we get like so far away from the mainstay of the film and adding so much of this humor in. But that by the time we get to that third act, Jim, where we come back around to that, the movie had kind of lost me at that point. I was kind of like, ugh, I don't really care, whatever. And then we get back to that, and then I started to engage with it again. Some of the humor like fell away. We started to get to the climax of the film, and it started to get me back. So I'm not saying it's a bad film. I liked it. It entertained me. I don't know that I agree with this whole, it's the best Marvel movie ever made. I think I thoroughly disagree with that. Yeah, I mean, go see it. It's a fun ride, but I don't think it's like super stellar for me. So
yeah. So we had a comment from Steve Sosa in the chat. It says it's every new Marvel movie or even comic movie trying to now be Game of Thrones. Guardians of the Galaxy. All these acronyms are getting me here. Guardians of the Galaxy. And there was, I don't know, you could almost imagine the board meetings or the production meetings at higher levels with this saying, oh man, we really hit it out of the park with Guardians of the Galaxy and also with Deadpool. Can we make a Thor movie that's kind of more like those? And maybe they did. Maybe they tried that. Maybe that was behind their decision to go for a very popular comic director, creative guy like Taika Waititi. But I don't know if Thor was the right property to try to introduce this in. Like I said, some of it worked. I mean, at the beginning, they're really making fun of the whole. I mean, there was a whole kind of a play within a story within a story where they're doing the play wheel
Yes,
which I thought was cool. And that was cool for a bunch of reasons, because it's lampooning the actual story, right? It's kind of very, very meta in the way but it also has some cool little stunt casting things going on inside it where you're like, oh my God, who's that? Oh, that's so-and-so, or, and I don't want to give too much away because that'd be spoiler talk, but and that stuff, like I said, the whole first act was great. And then when we got to the part where, and you guys have seen the trailer, this is no spoiler, there's kind of a big fight scene between Hulk and Thor when they first get together in this movie. And after that, it really the movie kind of sagged for me a little bit until kind of halfway through the third act when it really picked up and the stakes were like, okay, now I got to see what's really going to go down here.
For me, what I love so much about the inclusion of humor here is I feel like this is getting closer to the Thor that I've been looking for. Like when I think like comic book Thor, like, yes, you do have these like kind of like godly epic stories, but the character of Thor is like a drunken womanizing warrior type guy, the type, I'm going to grab my axe and go off and fight, And there's like this like lust for life that I think you definitely didn't see as much in Dark World, and you got to see a little bit of in the first Thor movie, but unfortunately that movie was about Thor trying to figure out life on Earth. I think this movie here focuses on an alien planet, and it focuses on Asgard as its primary locales. And in doing so, it shows us that this character of Thor, like, he doesn't have to be in a fish out of water amongst humans. We don't have to have these kind of scientist characters going around to normalize him. We can see him as the more human character. And that, for me, helped me latch onto the character more, helped me understand what he was going through and feel what he was going through. And I think part of it's, again, Taika Waititi as a director, I think that he has a good grasp of, he has a really good grasp of improvised, but character-based comedy. Like I read somewhere, like, a good, like 80% of the, not the script, but the way that it appeared on screen came from improvised moments, where he let the actors kind of say, oh, well, I would probably say it like this. And then they would kind of futz around with it a little bit. And I like that. I like that, he had enough framework so that he could tell a story that had structure and with comedic jokes and callbacks that weaved their way through the film kind of gracefully, but also in a very improvised and collaborative manner. Like, it takes a very special director to pull off something like that. Yeah.
I mean, there were, I wanted to get back a little bit to the cast here. Helmsworth is a great Thor. I mean, I love him in that role. And I do kind of like the moments that he has of comedy, but some of the characters in this movie seem like they were should have been in a different movie. I'm gonna call out the Grand Master, Jeff Goldblum. It just was very, very discordant, I thought, in this movie. Some of the stuff that was going on there, I felt it hard to really care about anything that he was doing or making happen in his little world, because he was just so like out there. Like, I mean, who was the guy in what was that movie we saw with oh God, never mind. Eddie Redmayne in what was that movie we saw him in?
Jupiter Ascending.
Jupiter Ascending. He was like that times 10. You know what I mean? Like kind of off the wall. Detached, crazy king. But anyway, that whole section in there really just kind of threw me off. And that's just, it could be just a taste thing. I just didn't like the taste of that as I was ingesting it. And therefore I was like, okay, let's get past this and get back to the Thor versus big monster stuff. But, and we did.
So it's getting increasingly difficult to talk about this film without going into spoilers. So I think we're at that point. If you guys are on board, we'll go ahead and make that jump. All right. Heimdall is calling up the Bifrost to deliver us to Spoiler Town. So while he puts in that magic sword, it turns it and attunes it. This is your chance. If you're watching live, go ahead and mute us. If you don't want to be spoiled, come on back in about 15 minutes. If you're listening on digital tape delay, use the handy dandy time index that Jim lovingly crafts for you in the show notes to skip ahead to plugs. You won't want to miss those. I've awkwardly rambled long enough to give you time to hit pause. Steve Sosa, we'll see you later. No worries at all. We understand wanting to retain your virginity when it comes
to had to work. He must have had to work this weekend and been a hardworking man and not had time to see that movie.
Could be. Steve, hopefully you'll come back later and tune on back in. But guys, spoilers are officially fair game. Jim, let's start with the Jeff Goldblum stuff. So you're talking about the whole thing that happens on the planet where Hulk is a gladiator and Thor gets that super fucking awesome haircut that made him way hotter. Just saying. And they have to duke it out, right?
Yeah. He gets basically captured by this Tessa Thompson character, right? Valkyrie, who's like a bounty hunter, I guess, for the Grandmaster, and brought back and forced to fight in this gladiatorial competition. And lo and behold, of course we knew from the trailers, it's Hulk. And to me, that's a reveal that I probably shouldn't have been in the trailers. Can you imagine what that reveal would have been like had we not known that was going to happen? I think it would have knocked people out. It would have been like, oh my God, we're going to get a lot of Hulk in this movie. But I don't know, man. This is not to blame Goldblum because he's doing his thing, but the character just seemed a little discordant for me.
Yeah, I very much I'll differ a bit and say I really enjoyed the middle part of the movie. It was one of my favorite parts of the movie, and I think that's I mean, it's probably part of that's going to be a source material thing, which is that's just going to be a different. Some audiences are going to come in here with. For a long time, they've been talking about making turning probably the best Hulk storyline ever, Planet Hulk, into a movie, but they could never do it because even though Disney owns the character of the Hulk, they have a deal with Universal where they can't actually make a Hulk movie. Like that's part of that was part of their purchase back. So the middle of this movie includes pretty much the storyline of Planet Hulk, but with Thor introduced in the in kind of a primary spot. I liked that quite a bit. I liked that there's some fan service in terms of some of the stuff there, but I also liked that what we got here as a result of that is this little vignette section, this middle act that was all about Hulk and Thor and Valkyrie and maybe to a lesser degree Loki. Like those four characters just interacting with one another. There's a couple of fights or whatever, but it's like it's pretty much just them talking and interacting and developing their characters off of each other. That's what I love so much about this. We're able to have the big fights at the end and kind of all of this, the kind of the back and forth stuff that happens early on. But you've got this middle section that's both removed from the story, but also in a way that's almost purposeful to let these characters grow and develop into something cooler. Now, if there's a cameo that did not work for me, I did not mention this beforehand. I did not really need the Doctor Strange cameo at the beginning of the movie. Like that felt superfluous.
Yeah, I mean, like I didn't anticipate, I guess, that he was going to be in the movie, that they were going to do that. So when all of a sudden you started to see the little like orange ring appearing under Loki, I'm like, oh no, please don't be what I think it is. And then, oh, guess what? Doctor Strange. And like, I get it. They're merging all of these characters. They're all going to come together in Infinity War. Like, you got to remind us of Doctor Strange. But it just seemed like such a tacky add-on. Like, did it serve any real purpose beyond just having him show up?
No, I don't mind if they did 1,000 cameos because this is a world where all these characters live and breathe and interact with one another, right? So I don't care if there's 1,000 of these cameos, just as long as they're well written. And I think that this one was not. That's my problem. Not that it was a world building, or not that it was anything else. It felt very like discordant with kind of the rest of the movie. Like its only purpose was Thor had to get to another spot on Earth quickly, and I think there's so many other ways you could write that.
Yeah, it seemed franchise serving to me to do that. You know, bigger franchise serving, not just Thor, obviously. And like, man, you're right, Will. I just think it was really superfluous and could have been written in many other ways. But, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, many more than us probably, who love to see Doctor Strange in this movie. You know, even though it didn't fit for us, it was like, oh God, it's Doctor Strange. That's cool. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's more fan servicey and franchise servicey to me than it doesn't service the story very well at all. And that's where my priorities lie, is always with story.
One thing that I think this is totally interesting for anyone to do, just in terms of some of these other actors and characters that are in this. There's a character in this movie who has a pretty small role, almost all comedic, which I guess is probably true most of the people here. And that's Carl Urban's character of Scourge, who, of almost every Marvel character, like if you pull up a picture of Scourge and you pull up a picture of Carl Urban as Scourge, that is the closest physical match I think I've seen of any of the Marvel ones. Like, that is a spot on Scourge. So if you're not familiar with that comic book character, you don't even have to read any comics for it. Just know that it is literally Carl Urban with head tattoos, and that's the way Scourge looks. So great job on the casting. And even his character arc in this, I thought was cool. Scourge is the dude. Scourge is the dude in the comics who, he's another Asgardian who sometimes gets sucked into the schemes of like people like the Enchantress and stuff like that. And he gets kind of pulled in sort of unwittingly. He's not a bad guy necessarily. He just gets pulled into these like shitty schemes by these worse villains. We got to see that play out here in a very interesting way with a little bit of an arc all the way through it. And it's just a small one, but I liked it. I really liked Scourge in this.
Yeah, I did too. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of the movie, I'm like, that guy looks super familiar. And like, we're not used to seeing him with the bald head and the, the eyebrows and the beard. And I'm like, I know that guy from somewhere. And I was racking my brain, and it did finally hit me. I leaned over to Brad. I'm like, that's Bones from Star Trek. And I'm like, yeah, that's who it is. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't really just comedic. I mean, he actually served a pivotal role in the climax of the movie, which was cool. I love to see that, you know, not bringing a character in just for jokes and then getting rid of him. I thought, like you said, Will, he had an arc, and that's cool.
You know, it's funny when I saw him on screen, and Jim, I know you were like trying to figure out who it was. Maybe it's because I was like really tired. We'd been up to like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then, you know, we were seeing this film at like 11 o'clock or whatever it was. But I was trying to figure it out, and then I was like, oh, I know who it is. It's that guy from that shitty show on Fox called Almost Human. But wait, what was his name again?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then Jim's like, it's Bones. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Right. Yeah. Star Trek. Okay.
You know, if Brad, just to support your theory there, whenever I think of Carl Urban, I always go through the exact same thought process. I go, Bones in Star Trek. Wait, he was also in that shitty Fox movie. Wait, why am I remembering that? He was also in Judge Dredd and other better that shitty Fox thing. But I always remember that show like in this weird like second place pivotal spot. So yeah, I'm with you. I get the brain link.
Hey, speaking of cameos that serve no purpose, I wanted to ask you guys, how are we feeling about the Stan Lee cameos at this point? Because they're getting longer and longer in every movie.
Well, I will say this about the cameo. I didn't give a fuck about the cameo, to be honest. But what he did do is he cut Thor's hair, and I think that made a lot of people very excited.
I hear it made Brad pretty excited.
It made Simon in comments very excited to see Thor with a shorter shorter hair. He said he'd
Simon-
definitely bang shorter-haired Thor.
Simon, I think you and I are going to have a three-way with shorter hair Thor. We got to share, but that's okay because
There's
that just
plenty of
got
Thor
way
to go
hotter
around.
thinking about. I was thinking plenty of Simon with Thor as a bonus, but we'll figure out that combination. But Will, what did you think of the Stan Lee cameo? I mean, did it work for you here? Was it too much?
So I'm really of two minds about this, and so bear with me here. So as they exist, as it specifically exists in this movie, taking everything out, like, yeah, it's a very silly cameo, and it doesn't serve any purpose. I mean, yeah, he could have just shown up in the arena with shorter hair. We wouldn't need to have seen the haircut scene, and it would have been fine, right? But and in a lot of these movies, his cameos are silly and don't really do much. And they're also, like, the uncomfortable thing about them is they also sort of remind you of Stan Lee's mortality. Like, he's an old dude, and like every film that we see him in since they've started this kind of Marvel experiment of having him be in a cameo role in them, he's looking older. He's looking older, and so I'm reminded of that. But here's the other thing. This guy is, for a lot of us that kind of grew up in the, with comic books, we not only to Stan Lee, but he is one of the people that we owe a lot of our childhoods and adulthoods to as well. And as much as I might gripe and grouse a little bit about them, the first of the movies that he doesn't appear in, I think that's going to be very, 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 very jarring and very sad for me personally. So it's like it's a thing that it's like I'm going to miss it when it's no longer here. Those cameos. So I'm rolling with them in the meantime. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, from kind of like an outsider, I think they are fan servicey and nostalgic, and that's what they are. And they're there for that purpose. I also heard that they've filmed several of these already, kind of with framework of their franchise movies in their minds. And even if, God forbid, something should happen to Stan Lee and he can't shoot these, I think they've got a bunch of these in the can that they could probably have Stan Lee in their movies for quite a long time, which is a good thing.
But I don't want to see, when he passes, I don't want to see digital Stan Lee or anything like that. Like, it's going to stand out. It's going to be tacky.
They need to leave that idea alone. I hadn't even thought of that till you mentioned it, but God, if we can have Tarkin show back up or Leia show back up and, the actors are dead, man, do you think they'd do that?
I don't think they would. And I think mainly because if it, like, when you have a character like Leia or something like that, like, that's an important character for that specific scene of that specific movie. So you either get an actress to recreate her, you shoot her from the side, or you do digital recreation, so there are ways that you have to fill a story and you have to do that. Stan Lee's characters never have to fill a role. They're always put in a very non-integral role. I think the correct way to handle it, at least for me, would be the first movie that he's not alive for. And I hate saying that. It's not like but it's a fact of life. None of us are here forever. I think just having him not appear as a cameo in that movie and doing kind of a respectful, like, for Stan tag or at the beginning or end, or, something like that would be all that I would need in terms of, like, as a fan.
I had a question for you guys. Quick question.
Sure.
As we get off this. Where do you put this movie? Two-part question. Where do you put this movie in terms of all of the MCU movies? Top half or bottom half? That's the only two answers. And where do you put this movie among the now 4 comedic flavored Marvel movies? That being Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Deadpool, and now Thor Ragnarok.
I wouldn't put Deadpool in that last one because it's not Marvel. Like, that's a different company. that does those.
Okay.
That's Fox that does all of those.
Okay.
So then we have to start kind of, but I think you can replace that with Ant-Man because I think that was also
yeah,
comedy.
kind of. Yeah.
And I think the number still holds. I'm going to break your first rule. I'm going to say top third instead of top half.
Okay.
So it's a solid one, like of the ones that have, could I place this one in like my top 6 or so Marvel movies? Yeah, I think I could. Towards the bottom part of that top third, I think there's some stronger ones there. But I mean, this is to me kind of a start to finish, a really solid flick. And in terms of comedies, unfortunately, I think the Guardians of the Galaxy movies might, and both of them actually would rank higher than it. So it's weird. Like, of the comedies, it's lower on the list. But I think the comedies as a whole, barring like, Avengers and Winter Soldier, maybe another one in there, are amongst the top of the Marvel movies. So,
yeah. Okay. How about you, babe?
Goodness, let's see. I guess for me, it would be top half. When it comes to like the funnier films, I guess. I feel like it's about even with Guardians of the Galaxy 2 for me, whose comedy I didn't really enjoy that much either. And so I don't know. I do want to say I know I have a weird comedy bone, but there were a couple of moments that really made me laugh out loud here. That maybe elevates it just teensy weensy slightly above Guardians of the Galaxy 2. My favorite moment was it the first Avengers movie when Hulk is smashing Loki like back and forth?
Yep. Avengers.
Yeah, so we totally get a callback to that when Hulk is now doing the same thing to Thor, and Loki's like sitting there like, yes, now you know what it feels like. That delighted me to no end. So, Jim, in service to your question, I think that slightly edges out Guardians just because of that moment for me. But what's your feeling here, Jim? Because I mean, you're kind of approaching these movies. You don't have the same kind of comic background that we kind of do. So, what's your feeling?
I'd say it's probably the top end of the lower half for me. Kind of near the top end of the lower half in the whole MCU. And then as far as the comedic movies go, I definitely put the first Guardians of the Galaxy at the top. This probably gets second billing, then Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And then, of course, I shouldn't have included it, as Will said, but something like Deadpool would be like the next one for me.
We have an interesting comment here in chat from Sky Bridges, who says, I loved this movie. It's probably my number 2 Marvel movie. His number 1 is Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 2, Thor Ragnarok. He says it's because I love Hulk, though. This movie is what I've been waiting for in terms of Hulk. And I want to definitely flag that one of the things that I enjoyed so much about this, the Planet Hulk storyline was great, but also within that, we got to see Ruffalo as Banner, which we've seen before. And we got to see him do a lot more as Hulk. Like most of the time in the past when we've seen him as Hulk, it's been more of just, kind of combat mode Banner, right? Like, he hulks out for a little bit, fight, CGI. But we got to see Hulk's personality for a good chunk there. And I loved watching the way Hulk and Thor bantered and interacted with one another, and then the way Banner and Thor interacted with one another. One of my favorite kind of like callback jokes was when he basically dissed the other one to, so when he's talking to Hulk and he's like, oh yeah, I like you way better than Banner. He's all like, do math. And then later on, it's like, oh, you're so much better than, Hulk smash. I loved that. I loved the interplay. I loved seeing Ruffalo Hulk just pranking and throwing jokes in addition to just like being a combat monster. I loved that.
I do have a question though about the Hulk component to this. So at one point, like Banner's like, oh, I've been Hulk for 2 years. And then he's like, well, if I turn into the Hulk again, I'm probably never going to be able to be Banner again. And then he like chooses to Hulk out at the end. Was he still Hulk at the very end of the movie in like the final shots? We didn't see him like go back to being Banner, right?
I can't remember.
I don't think he went back to Banner.
I think the last shot was of them standing on the bridge of that giant ship heading to Earth, I guess, and kind of talking about things. And I think at that point he's Hulk.
Okay. So we have no like Hulk resolution then as to whether he can become Banner again.
No.
At least not at this time.
But
yeah.
But to your point and to Sky's point, and thanks Sky for joining us this time. Sky is a friend we met at the movies here in Tucson, so he's really cool on the comic book movies. But short of a Hulk movie, I mean, this one had a lot of Hulk in it, and so I could see why, as a Hulk fan, Sky, that you really love this movie, because you got a lot of bang for your buck there.
Absolutely. Simon, ever the cutie, Simon in chat asks, side question, how much did Cate Blanchett remind anyone else of a drag queen?
Yep. I love that. It's just this like, it's not just that she was like a badass. It's not just that she was like lordly or anything like that. She was fierce,
mean, and fierce.
Fierce, which is like such a drag queen thing. Like, it's not just about being attractive. It's about this, like, it's a great drag queen. It's not just about how beautiful you look or how good your makeup is or how good your costume, although that's important. A lot of it's about poise and demeanor, just how you carry yourself and how much like energy and control of a room you've got. And I felt like whenever Cate Blanchett's Hela was on screen, she was just, in a good way, just sort of eating everything up, like just chewing the fuck out of that scenery.
You could say she was hella cool.
Yeah, she was hella.
You could say that.
Yeah. No, I loved her character, and when she was on the screen, it was great. I thought she was a really good villain, kind of like a really even rougher version, or how should I say? A more menacing version of like Rita Repulsa almost. That's kind of what it reminded me.
Except no Krispy Kreme or Dunkin'
No
Donuts.
Krispy Kreme. No Krispy Kreme. Yeah. But yeah, I liked it. And who knew she was like Odin's daughter, right? I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest departures they've had for a character in terms of like where they exist in the comics versus where they exist in the movies. But I think that this serviced this story very well, making her Odin's daughter and pulling that in. I want to do a special, like I mentioned her at the beginning of this, but Tessa Thompson was a damn revelation as Valkyrie. Like, I want to see as much of this character as possible. I like the energy and the swagger that she brought to this role. I loved how much they gave her in terms of just like chewy things to do. This is also, and we didn't get to see it as much in the movie just because they didn't spend any time developing her outside of just like her role as a Valkyrie and her role as Thor's friend type thing. But this is a bisexual character, and Tessa Thompson kind of in some of her interviews said, I think there might have been a scene where they were going to hint at it and it wasn't important to the main part of the story. But she played her as a bisexual character and will continue to play her as a bisexual character. And I think that that's good. Like, I would love to see more representation of that, like, appear on screen. But just the fact that that's something that is being pulled into the characterizations, I think, is a good first step, just not a full step.
Yeah, I wanted to see more of her, actually, and know more about her.
I think what you're saying, Will, is that Valkyrie puts the bi in Bifrost.
Which is probably where that came from. It's actually the actual Norse term. Like, it's so funny. Like, Bifrost comes from like the actual Norse term for like the Rainbow Bridge from Asgard and stuff. Because a lot of this is stolen straight from mythology. It's just, I guess, funnier now that we that it represents two words that we use to mean other things.
Indeed. Well, guys, it is time to start looking towards wrapping this thing up. So any final comments on Thor Ragnarok before we move on to some plugs?
We mentioned the Immigrant Song earlier. I love the choice of that song for the battle scenes. It was used at least a couple of times. Once at the beginning, I think once at the end. And I thought it worked great for both scenes. Yeah, I love that song. I mean, that's an old time classic from a long time ago in my youth. but when I was about 11.
What's so neat about that song is it plays well in the trailers, but I was surprised when it actually showed up in the movie. I thought it was just going to be random, like, trailer music, but we see it twice in the movie. Once to set up like him just kicking the ass out of Surtur at the very beginning. Cool, whatever. But it plays there at the end during kind of the final, like, fight thing. And it works so well. There's actually a line in the song that's like, the hammer of the gods will drive our ships to new lands, which is very, 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 very fitting for this movie. Like,
oh, yeah. It's got a Viking theme to it.
Viking, and that's literally what happened. The hammer of the gods literally drove their ships to new lands here. Like, that is just one of the most perfect inclusions of like a pop culture song in a film that I've ever seen. Kudos to them for scoring this song.
Which does remind me, Mjolnir destroyed within like the first 10 minutes of the film. We never saw Mjolnir like reforged or anything. So I'm guessing that's going to be a plot point maybe in the future movie.
Yeah, because what is Thor without Mjolnir, really? Well, Odin told him what he was, right? It was just he has nothing to channel his power now, or I don't know.
I thought for sure at the end when he like came back, we were going to see him like reforge Mjolnir in a blast of lightning or something, but no.
A lot of this has been sort of to a lot of the things here help line things up with where the comic books are now, because we've got a Thor who for a few years now hasn't actually wielded the hammer. Someone else has wielded the hammer. He's just, he's fought with an axe, and he's done this cool little like half shoulder cape thing. And for me, what I like about this is that it evolves the character forward in a way where you don't necessarily, at least MCU, this shows that you don't have to necessarily have the hammer to have Thor. What you have to have is the presence of Thor, like that bravado, that willingness to kick ass, his strength, his thunder, like all of those things. Like, the hammer is an important part of his lore. But like, if you took the S off of Superman, he would still be a badass Superman.
Yeah, that's not going to fly with the fans, though. There's no way you're not going to take the hammer away from Thor for very long. You're not going to take the shield away from Cap very long. And I just don't. I'm not a super fan guy, but I know you have the people out there. It's like, Thor's not going to be the same without Mjolnir.
Yeah, and you're going to get that with anything, people who want status quo. But I think the fact that he has been without the hammer for years, like not just like, for like a couple comics, like he's been without the hammer for years now in the comic book. So anyone coming from that influence will probably be able to be cool with it because, like I've seen this before. And they've replaced it with him advancing forward with his like thunder and stuff like that. Like, he's embracing this mantle of the god of thunder in exciting ways. Like, he's not just every so often pulling one lightning bolt. He did some badass like Mortal Kombat Raiden moves in this movie. Like, he's just like lightning punching dudes left and right here. I thought that was pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to see him fight differently, utilizing his powers. But Jim, I do agree with you. It's like if Cap loses his shield, or Spider-Man no longer has his web spinners or whatever you call them, web shooters. Sure, maybe there are other things about the character. They don't need the shield or the web shooters, but they're sort of iconic visual parts of that character. So it is a little bit weird. Also from a marketing perspective, like, how the fuck is Disney going to sell lightning coming out of Thor's hand as opposed to $150 like Thor's hammer replica?
The hammer was still in this one, so you still get another movie with the hammer.
No, I know. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if in the next movie, Sky mentioned in the chat in the concept art for Infinity War, it looks like Thor has a different weapon. Maybe they give him, I don't know, a sword or something. I haven't seen the concept art, but Mjolnir's a really recognizable thing. There were no less than 8 kids who were Thor this year for Halloween who came to our door, and each one of them had their own cute little tiny adorable Mjolnir in hand, and they're like,
you stole them all. You stole them all you swapped them all for candy.
I did. I'm like, I'll give you extra candy for your little Mjolnirs. But no. Anyway, all right. Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and move into some plugs here. Let's wrap this behemoth of a show up. Plugs is the section of the show, if you are new, where we tell you about things we're interested in, we're excited about. Jim, what have you got this week?
I'm going to go back. I didn't get to watch a lot of movies this weekend, but I did watch some TV, and I went back and watched a TV show episode that we talked about on this show several times. But now that we haven't in a while, and it's been a year since it came out, and we went back and watched an episode of Black Mirror called San Junipero. Man, this holds up. This is probably the best single episode of TV that I've seen in the last couple of years. I mean, and that's talking about Game of Thrones and, House of Cards, anything else. This show has it all. It's got a great story, great performances by the actors. It's got a hot bear in it. That's you, Ray McAnally, if you remember him. It takes you to unexpected places. It's got it's real kind of emotional story on several different levels. But yeah, if you haven't seen San Junipero yet, you need to get on that. It's on Netflix right now. Dial up San Junipero on season 3 of Black Mirror. It's definitely worth a rewatch if you've seen it before as well.
Well, and it was interesting seeing it in the setting that we did. So we're in the Palm Springs house, and the house has this like big room in the middle that's just like a rec room. Like it's got a foosball table, big screen TV. And so we're all just kind of hanging out. And Jim, you were like, have you guys seen Black Mirror's San Junipero? And some of the guys were like, no, but we've heard it's good. So Jim just puts it on. And, San Junipero is like an hour and, 11 minutes or whatever it is. And like, toward the end, everybody, for the most part, is like crying and doing the whole like look around to make sure nobody knows you're crying. But now you're looking around at everybody crying. And it was kind of like a cool social bonding moment in a way too. So Jim, if I were wearing a hat, I would tip it to you for using TV to bring the boys together. That was pretty special. All right, Will, what you got?
Yeah, so for me, I'm in a similar boat in that, like, just had a lot of travel, and as much as I want to plug like the new World of Warcraft cinematic, I want to focus on something more movie based. So before my trip, I shotgunned a few movies just to get caught up, and one of them, it's a slightly older movie, like 2006. Took me by surprise by just how much I enjoyed it. It's this movie called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. And this one had been on my radar for a bit, but I had never actually like kind of, taken the plunge for it. It's on Amazon. You can rent this movie right now. This movie it's in a fictional world where all of like the serial killers like Jason and Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger, like they all like have existed and have actually done their things in their particular neighborhoods. And this documentary crew finds this dude named Leslie Vernon, who wants to be the next one of those. And so like he's like, I'm gonna be the slasher guy, and the documentary crew is following him around, and like as he's like planning what he's gonna do, and he's picking the, like you've got to pick a girl who's like, you got to pick the air quotes like the virgin, and she's gonna have her jock and her geek friend, sort of like the horror movie tropes, right? Mm-hmm. And this movie what's so clever about this movie is it bounces in and out of like documentary format to kind of traditional film. Whenever it shows kind of the stuff that's happening, then it shoots back to like the documentary format, which takes up most of the movie as it follows the crew and their interviews and stuff like that. It's a very clever movie, and it goes to some pretty interesting places. And if you just like horror slasher movies, it's a good horror slasher movie too. But it just happens to be smarter than a lot of them. So yeah, it's Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Surprisingly watchable flick, and it's on Amazon.
All right.
Great.
Awesome. Good recommendation. For me this week, Murder on the Orient Express is coming out this weekend as we make our steady march toward Oscar season. I don't know if this movie will even be talked about for Oscars or be any good at all. But it does have sort of a cavalcade of stars in it. And I don't know. This is a story that I read back in high school, I guess. So I'm kind of excited to see this like play out in a modern movie sort of format. I think there was like a really old adaptation of this into a film. I vaguely recall seeing it in high school after we read the book, and I remember it being super boring and terrible. So I'm hoping to see this story done justice in a film. Yeah, Will, I saw your note. I think it was from like the 70s or something. Yeah, I'd have to look it up. But in any event, I'm excited for this movie. I don't know if it's what we're going to be talking about next week. I know we want to talk Creep 2 big time. So maybe we'll double feature it. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But definitely, put this movie on your radar. Looks like it could be good. So if you're looking for something to see this weekend and you've already seen Thor, it could be a potentially good choice.
You mentioned it has a cavalcade of movie stars. Does it have Cher in it?
I don't think so.
Oh, damn. Yeah. I was kind of hoping it had Cher in it, or, like, I don't know, somebody like George Clooney.
Well, I mean, we could fix it if only I could turn back time. Whoa.
This is one of those movies where it's like they picked a whole bunch of stars and like threw them at this movie, and oh god, I don't know. My expectation going in is pretty low, so this could be one of the ones that surprises me. Let's see.
If that's the thing, like this is one that is. So the director on this new one is Kenneth Branagh, right?
Yep.
So that gives me some hope. The dude, he always feels like the type of dude that like kind of classes up a film, right?
Yeah, like Thor 1.
Which was as far as the Marvel movies gone, it was it was kind of the classiest first one through. It had a lot of those like kind of like classical stylings to it. So, but just the fact that we've got people like, I mean, Johnny Depp and Judi Dench in the same film, like
I know the star of Tusk.
Weird blend, yeah. Willem Dafoe,
Josh Gad,
Ridley, Penelope Cruz. Like, I mean, this has just got so many people in it. But I'm excited to see it. I've got my ticket already for this weekend, so I'm on board. Murder on the Orient Express.
Let's hope it doesn't derail.
Oh God, we're gonna pun this. We're gonna pun next week's episode to oblivion, and I'm okay with that.
Oh, goodness. Well, hey, as we look to wrap up here, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who hung out with us in the live chat. Ben and Sky and Simon and Steve and everybody else who joined up. Glad to hang out with you guys. For those of you who are listening on digital tape delay, you can still hang out with us too on Facebook. Look for the Movie Bears podcast. Join in the discussion. When you see the posts go up with the episode, tell us what you thought of Thor Ragnarok. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Believe it or not, it's not all about us. Sometimes we like keying into what you guys are talking about. So join in. Jim and Will, as we close this thing down, if people want to find you and interact with you. Jim, where can they locate you online?
Please find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Puliafico, Puliafico, or find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. JJP OUTWEST, all one word. I do like the Twitters. I don't tweet a lot, but I am on there and I read tweets. So tweet at me.
All right. Will, how about you?
Hey, so you can find me on Twitter at whatever cove. You can find me on Facebook. I'm William Lindis. Just send me a message first so I know that you're a real human being. Look for me on Letterboxd. I post reviews of every movie I watch there, so that's useful. And unlock your private picks for me on WBear. So those are the places you can find me. Ha ha! Thirsty bitches.
Not surprised. After the weekend you just had with all the straight bears, you're probably feeling a little
Blue.
thirsty. Maybe
That was a good weekend.
little blue. You can find me on Facebook. Look for Brad Harris. Unfortunately, there is more than one. I am not the Brad Harris with a Confederate flag behind him holding guns in like a Christmas card photo with his family. So I'm the, beefy, chunky, hairy homo guy. So feel free to add me on Facebook, but definitely say hi first. You can find me on Twitter, which I've started using more of because you guys are Twitter shaming me. When I say you guys, Jim, Will, I don't mean you. I mean other people who are like, I followed you, but you never tweet. Now that they're expanding the number of characters from 140 to 280, I think I'm going to be more excited about Twitter. I hate having to like abandon all hope of punctuation, ye who enter Twitter. So I'll have to get more active, but add me on Twitter at iBradPro. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll see you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.